Hello, everyone. We're happy to be here again with you. This is Dr. Hebden, and I'm Dr. Carolyn Phillips, and we are here to talk to you today about, first off, our fundraiser that we are doing. We are raising money to do a research study called A Dual Role: Nurses as Caregivers. And we're specifically interested in looking at nurses who balance the dual role and what the emotional and financial strain or experience that they have. And so in this study, we're looking to hear their stories by doing qualitative interviews and then also doing survey data to kind of look at the overall trends and implications and tie those together with their stories. So Dr. Hudman just posted the link to our HornRaiser, and we are aiming to raise $20,000. We are at 4,700 last I looked, and so we are inching our way there.
Yes.
And I think we have, 9 more days to go? Is that right?
Yeah, this closes on the 10th at 9 a.m. So 8 and a little bit.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, so today we thought we would talk about the use of expressive arts. And that is a very common way that we as human beings in society oftentimes process emotions, is through different expressive arts forms. And both Dr. Hebden and I have experience in using different art forms, and we thought we'd just talk about that process and then share some of our stories and songs and poems with you today.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd ask you first. How did you start writing poetry? Was it when you assumed that this caregiving role, or have you been doing it all of your life?
A little bit of both. So I really started writing when I was in college. I actually started out wanting to be a writer, and nursing was like my meal ticket because it's a guaranteed paycheck. But
Yep.
as I got further along in my nursing education, I realized that that was a space that I could offer, where I could offer a lot to the world, and that maybe writing for me was more of something for myself. And so I took a couple poetry classes in college, and I was the editor of a college magazine, literary magazine. And so kind of what started my poetry writing at that phase was I was grappling with the experiences I had growing up with a brother who had cancer, which was also my motivation to become an oncology nurse. And so, I hadn't gone through counseling or anything after he died. And I think I just had a lot of stuff that I was carrying with me. And so that was a way that I could work through some of that. And so I have a poem about that, about my dad and I. I remember my brother died this time of year when I was 10, so a long time ago. And he died in our home. We had hospice nurses in our home. And part of our family tradition was to take treats to the neighbors as a holiday, gift. And so I remember my brother down the hall dying, and my father and I making an apple pie together.
Oh.
And that's a kind of a bittersweet memory. It's pretty cherished because it was a special moment, I felt like, with my dad.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that has a lot of sadness as part of it. So I can share that poem.
I'd love to hear that.
Share a poem about my caregiving of my daughter. So my nose gets red and I cry. So just be prepared.
That's what we're here for.
Okay, so this is called Dad and Apple Pie. And I have it here, so I'm not going to be looking at the camera. I apologize. I should have done my setup a little better.
Good.
I moved down the blue lit hall, summoned by shuffling steps and orange light. Above the marble-plated counter, you stand with mussed hair and your faded dad apron, effaced with markings of kinetic children. Father and daughter, sleepwalkers among dough, kneading out angry phrases in silk elasticity. We have the secret, everything fixed by a fresh apple pie. My first during that 10-year winter, you instructed as my brother, your son, lay barely conscious, waiting his passage from pain. We measured and mixed glossy stemmed fruit, pouring our grief and seeded denial, peeling off mortal understanding, sliced into half-moon hopes, a brown-flecked mound sealed by a pastry lid.
Mm. Megan, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are a really good writer.
I like it.
Yeah, you should. That's really beautiful. You know, Megan, I didn't know this about you.
Oh,
I didn't know that history. You know, what was interesting is when I was doing my research study, I found that 60% of the people in my study of oncology nurses had lost a sibling or a parent during their formative years to cancer, and that's what inspired their going into oncology. And I'm just amazed by how many people were inspired in that way. And I'm so glad that you have your poetry as a form of expression, because what I also found is that a lot of people didn't have a way to talk about it. And I think that one of the challenges that happens in families is that parents have their grief and siblings have their grief, and parents are still parents, and it's so complicated. And um, did you share that poem with your dad?
yes, yeah,
Mhm.
I did. Yeah, it was. I think even still, I don't know if he remembers it in the same way as I do that moment, but um, yeah, I think actually poetry for me was also a way to communicate with my family because
Yeah.
we, as we've grown, I think families evolve and we
Mhm.
all grow.
Yep, yep.
Even parents, I've learned that as a parent, but I think growing
Yeah,
up, I didn't know how to communicate how I felt to my
yeah.
parents. And so I think that was a way that I could communicate how I was feeling and processing.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, even though most of what I write is really sad, I don't try to be. I tend to feel like I'm a generally happy person, but
It's 'cause you
I
get it
feel
out.
very deeply. I feel joy and I feel sorrow and I feel
Yeah,
them very deeply. And so
yeah.
I think for me, this is a way of kind of like letting go of some of that
Mhm.
sadness. And so it's kind of a lot of my poems are bittersweet, kind of the
Yeah,
joy within the sorrow.
yeah,
So anyway, I found that really helped me as a young adult to communicate with my parents when I couldn't really find the words. So,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that is common. I think it's hard to write about happy things without them sounding trite, too.
yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
and oftentimes when we need to write, it's because we have a hard emotion that we're needing to process or find our way through. And that tends to be more sadness and anger and those types of things. Um, with our band, Hardened and Tempered, our tagline is "Sad songs dressed pretty," and
Yeah. I love it.
yeah, and we we're highly aware that most of our songs are quite sad, and it's a tough balance, Kristen is the one who writes primarily the songs for the band, and I always am like, "How about a happy one? How about a happy song?" It's like it's not that easy.
No, it's not that easy to kind of capture joy in the same way.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah, well, I really want to hear more about you and Kristen and the development of
Sure.
your band and your work. And I can just close out my part with this poem I
Yeah,
wrote
sure.
about my daughter. I wrote this when my daughter was about 4. And I was like scanning, I just have a book that I keep in my purse to take notes and stuff. And
Yeah.
she'd drawn pictures and written her letters of her name, M and H. And it's like as I was scanning through that, this poem came to me, and we had just been through a lot with her with hospitalizations and illness. So I'll share this, and it's
Okay.
called Maggie My poem names are not very imaginative. It's just what they are. So I look at my daughter's drawings in this book, potato head faces and repeated H's. Her smile as she tells me, "Look, mommy, an H." She is sure, joyful, wild, driven, knowing how to swing her body up and over my arms, free, fierce in her resolve to learn a gymnastics flip or steal her brother's toys. Her instinct to hurt or heal is precise. She loves as hard as she races her bike around our circle with her baby in tow, running errands, smiling, free. She is a marvel, this smiling golden girl whose life has been joy and suffering. Her body tensing, no breath, gasps, glazed eyes, hospital monitors, staff racing, the nod, hand clasp, medication changes, powdered pills and applesauce. Her determination smiling with EEG leads streaming down her hair, pushing the lockdown door with her will. My baby girl teaching me to fight for her, for me, my powerful girl who will be the mommy she plans to be, independent, stronger than anyone I have been.
Mm. Oh, Megan, just deeply beautiful, really beautiful. Oh, and there were so many lines in there that I loved, but even the way that you started it with the potato heads and H's, what was that line?
The potato head faces and repeated H's. Yeah.
Repeated H's, what a beautiful, it just has such great flow to that line.
Thank you.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I could talk to you about this forever,
Yes, we'll have
as
to
we
do that
do.
offline.
As we do.
Yes, now I want to hear about you and how you and Kristen, found yourselves as musicians. We've talked a little bit, but I'd love to hear the more of your story about
Yeah,
that.
the way that Kristen and I found our way into music, and then the way that I started doing my work that involved storytelling through music, to help healthcare professionals process the grief and suffering they see in their work, are kind of two different tracks. And I first off, I just wanted to share this quote that I think is beautiful, that just kind of talks about expressive arts. And it says, the therapeutic power of art rests not in its elimination of suffering, but rather in its capacity to hold us in the midst of that suffering so that we can bear the chaos without denial or flight. And
Love that.
I love that, because I think that it's so hard to feel some of these emotions that we feel. And art just has such a magical way of helping us feel them in an acceptable way too.
Mhm.
Um, but so I got into, so Kristen and I, we started playing music together, gosh, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, it's been quite a while. And we weren't doing any original stuff in the immediate time. We were doing a lot of covers and just playing in cover bands. And then Kristen got back to her roots of writing, and
Mhm.
she used to write a lot in high school and college, but kind of got away from it and got back to that and started writing her own songs. And that's when it really took off for us. Was when she really started doing the creation side. And then I had used, she and I actually had worked through an issue that I needed to work through in my own mental health. And I said, I was like, I'd processed it, really wasn't moving anywhere with it. And I was like, I think I need to sing this out. And
Mhm.
so at that time, we were actually in at a distance, and she was living in an Airstream and I was in Santa
Wow.
Fe. And we spent one whole afternoon in the Airstream writing the story, processing the story, and then she put it into a song for me. And the second I sang it in a song, I moved through those emotions that I was holding on to in such a deep way that began my healing on a personal side. And then I, started working. Then a number of years went by after that had happened. And I was kind of in this place again where I had burned out of a career that I deeply loved. I love being an oncology nurse, but it was starting to hurt me. Like I was not coping with it well anymore. And so I started the process of writing stories. I wrote many stories, stories of patients I'd cared for, going all the way back to working as a nursing assistant in college. And I wrote their stories, and that was one thing. It gave me insight into my grief, but it didn't help move the dial for me emotionally. At that point, I was just numb. I was numb to any emotion, good emotion, bad emotion, and I needed something to help me feel. And so that's when I went back to that. I think I need to sing this out. And so I knew that Kristen could write my story and help me, but I thought on a bigger scale, can somebody else who doesn't know me take one of my stories and do the same thing? And so I hired a songwriter in Austin and worked with a songwriter, and we did that same process. And it was immediate in that same way. The story that was a traumatic story, but I felt it for the first time when I heard it in music. And so that's when I really went down this path of trying to help others who aren't in a creative family, maybe who don't have access to a songwriter, who don't, like that sort of thing, like helping to bring the arts to more healthcare professionals. And so that's how I got into this work. But one of the early stories I also wrote was about my own burnout and how did I get here, and trying to figure that out. And so I'll read you the story that I wrote, and then I'll play the song as well. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I grieved the loss of Grammy 6 years prior to her death. I grieved the loss of her when I learned she was diagnosed with lung cancer. I remember getting that fateful call from my mother. During the call, I shifted into oncology nurse mode. I was sad, but my focus in that moment was on how my mother, my grandmother, and grandfather were doing and what they needed. When I hung up, I fell to the ground and sobbed. I felt like the weight of every person I had cared for with cancer came crashing down on me. My grandmother, the matriarch of our family, had lung cancer. I knew what this meant. It felt like an eternity passed as I lay on the ground, but I couldn't get up. I could only sob. Later, when I was reflecting on that moment, I realized that how I grieved the loss of my grandmother was also how I grieved the patients I was caring for. I grieved the loss of them at the moment they were diagnosed with cancer. Is this how I was protecting my heart? Maybe. Was this anticipatory grief? Maybe. Maybe this is actually a method of dissociating in order to protect myself from all of the grief and suffering I had seen. I don't know. At the time, I rationalized it as a healthy way of coping with repeat grief. I thought that if I grieved my patients at diagnosis, I would be able to be there for them fully throughout their toughest times because my heart was no longer a factor in the equation. Only their needs mattered. I was simply a vessel for caregiving. I still think that may be true in part, but I ultimately think I was missing something. There was an essential step that must have been missing because now I feel stuck in a state of grief. Somewhere throughout the years of caregiving, I fear I lost my essence, the soul of my work. My open heart that once held space for suffering now feels like a shell, a skeleton of what once was full of compassion and depth. Unknowingly, what I expressed as the cause of my pain is the exact definition of compassion. That is to be able to hold and sustain emotional balance while holding patients' despair in one hand and their hopefulness in the other. I could no longer do this. I had lost hope. Compassion was my professional strength, and now it pains me. No longer being able to do this work also causes me anger. I am angry that I was not taught how to care for myself in a way that allowed me to continue to do this work with the vulnerability of an open heart and with my humanity leading the way. I'm angry with our profession that we do not value this enough to teach it in our education. And ultimately, I'm angry with myself for not having the strength to stand up for what I know I needed. Instead, I allowed my heart to be ping-ponged around throughout the day with no pause or moment of silence to process the gravity of our work. I went from one patient to the next, being present for each of their experiences in life and death, and took no time to appreciate how this affected me. Sadly, there is no billing code for self-care. I don't believe I'm alone in this struggle. Most importantly, I hope to help others. I hope to help prevent others from getting to this place. So my plea is for us to have compassion for each other and ourselves. And so
That's beautiful.
thank you. And this is the song that Kristen and I wrote. I say goodbye before hello. I'm mourning you before you go. I say goodbye before hello. I've got unattended sorrow I gave away until there's nothing left. There's no billing code for self-care and rest. I gave away until there's nothing left. Now I've got all these pains in my chest. I need to get my sleep and clear out the stress. The way I care for you, I need to care for myself. I need to root my heart where love can grow. I need to sing a song for my soul. I need to sing a song for my soul. Check in, check out, timed increments. Grief spins through me on rinse and repeat. Check in, check out, timed increments. I've got no time to process this. Without this work, you don't know me. Despair's what's left, hope's gone to seed. Without this work, I don't know me. It pains me to give you what you need. So I say goodbye before hello. I'm mourning you before you go. I say goodbye before hello. I've got unattended sorrow. I need to get my sleep and clear out the stress. The way I care for you, I need to care for myself. I need to root my heart where love can grow. I need to sing a song. I need to get my sleep and clear out the stress. The way I care for you, I need to care for myself. I need to root my heart where love can grow. I need to sing a song for my soul. I need to sing a song for my soul. For my soul. For my soul.
Wow, that was wonderful, Carolyn. Or Dr. Phillips, sorry.
I
I
know.
No, I really appreciate the like not only the title, Song for My Soul, right? Because it's that deep part of us that's so affected by the work we do as nurses and the work we do as caregivers, but that also like caring for yourself,
Mhm.
like as we would care for somebody else. And I think just what you said in your story that like we aren't taught that, right? We aren't taught that as nurses. And I don't even think as family caregivers that people are often given permission to do that, care for themselves, and acknowledging how painful some of these things can be. So that was beautiful. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you so much. I completely agree. I think that from a nursing perspective, I think it almost goes down to I'm not sure if we value caring for ourselves as much as we value caring for others. And when you get to that like root of what we value, that's where that's like the root you have to get to because it's really hard for us to accept caring for ourselves. I think. Um, and so, yeah, I completely agree. And I think that also, a lot of family caregivers are women, and
Yes, yes, they
women,
are.
right? And women have that same core trait oftentimes, and so it's a double whammy.
It is. It is. We've got all these social forces, how people are, yeah, socializing their roles as women and as nurses and as caregivers. And yeah, that kind of that idea that caring for oneself is selfish is so, I think, harmful to people's
Absolutely,
well-being, which is why we want to do this work, right? Why
absolutely
we're
right.
raising this money for our research study on nurses as family caregivers. And just to put a last plug in for our study, we want to look at the emotional and financial well-being of nurses who are family caregivers, and we're working to raise $20,000. We're almost a quarter of the way there, which is a huge success in our mind, and we're so grateful, so very grateful for the generosity of all those who have donated and for people's time and participating in these events. And please consider sharing our information about our HornRaiser and looking at our page. The link was just dropped in the chat. Um, and yeah, thank you, Carolyn, for sharing your heart. I don't know. I always feel like when I'm sharing my writing, it's like, is my soul
Yep.
that I'm sharing.
And
So
yep, thank you so much as well. It was absolutely beautiful. So thank you. And until next week, we'll be back here next Wednesday. And that's it. So, everyone who's joined us, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
bye. Thank
Bye.
you.